I'm standing in the ICU waiting room at St. Mary's Hospital, staring at my phone, and I realize I have no idea where my husband is. It's 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in November, and the nurse just told me that Michael's father, the man I've been caring for around the clock for the past 3 weeks, just woke up from a coma nobody thought he'd wake up from. His eyes opened. He asked for water. And Michael? Michael is gone. Not in the bathroom, not getting coffee. Actually, truly gone. His truck isn't in the parking lot. His phone goes straight to voicemail. The last text he sent me was at 3:15 p.m. Don't wait up, got called into work. But he's not at work. I called. I'm standing here in the fluorescent nightmare of a hospital hallway, wearing the same sweater I've worn for 3 days straight, and I'm starting to understand that something very, very wrong has happened. Let me back up, because 3 weeks ago, everything was different. 3 weeks ago, my life looked almost perfect on paper. Michael and I had been married for 8 years, and we lived in a beautiful colonial in the Oakmont neighborhood. You know, the kind with the wraparound porch and the HOA that charges $180 a month and complains if your mailbox isn't painted the exact shade of Sherwin-Williams taupe. We'd bought it 5 years ago, right before the market went insane. Now it was worth probably $680,000, maybe more. We had good jobs. I'm an HR manager at a mid-size pharmaceutical company, $94,000 a year, plus benefits. Michael worked in commercial real estate, made more than me, though he was cagier about the exact numbers. We had a Tesla and a Honda Pilot. We took a vacation to Cabo every other year. We had friends. We had a nice dinner every Friday night, usually at Giovanni's downtown, or sometimes we'd cook something ambitious at home. From the outside, we were the kind of couple people envied. Not disgustingly rich, but comfortable. Stable. The kind of marriage that made other people think, yeah, I want that. The kind of marriage where you can miss the fact that your husband is slowly checking out. I didn't notice it happening. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to see it. He'd been distant for maybe 6 months. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point to and say, that's the moment it started. Just a gradual cooling, like a thermostat turning down degree by degree until you're shivering, but you're not sure why. He'd come home later. He spent more time in his home office with the door closed. Our Friday night dinners started getting canceled because of work emergencies or client situations. In bed, we'd stopped, well, that had stopped being a priority. I remember thinking it was normal, that marriages go through phases, that we were both tired and stressed, and we'd get back to it when things settled down. Things were never going to settle down. Michael's father, Robert, lived in an assisted living facility in Millbrook, about 20 minutes from our house. Robert had been there for 2 years after a stroke left him partially paralyzed. Michael was an only child, and his mother had passed away when he was 16. Robert was, well, he was difficult. Sharp-tongued, critical, the kind of man who'd look at a meal you'd spent an hour preparing and ask if you'd forgotten the salt. Michael didn't visit as much as he probably should have. He'd go once a month, maybe twice. I'd gone with him a few times, and each time I'd left feeling wrung out, like I'd been cross-examined in a courtroom instead of having a casual conversation. On October 18th, Michael called me at work. He never called me during the day. I was in a meeting with the compliance team, and I saw his name light up on my phone and felt that little spike of worry that you get when your husband calls at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. Robert had a stroke, he said. No preamble. A major one. They're saying he's in a coma. They don't know if he'll wake up. They're saying we should prepare for the worst. I left the meeting immediately. I drove to the hospital, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Michael was already there, sitting in the ICU family waiting room, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. His tie was loosened. He hadn't shaved. He had the expression of someone who'd just watched something break that he'd been responsible for. He's stable, but he's not conscious, Michael said when I got there. They said the next 48 hours are critical. If he makes it through that, there's a chance. But Ashley, they're saying if he does wake up, he might not be the same. I sat down next to him and took his hand. It was cold and shaking. We're going to get through this, I said. I meant it. I squeezed his hand and said it again. We're going to get through this together. Michael looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes that I couldn't quite read. It looked almost like sadness, but deeper than that, like goodbye. That moment should have told me everything. I wish I'd paid attention. Robert hung on. Days turned into weeks. He remained unresponsive, but his vital signs stabilized. The hospital said he could probably be moved to a long-term care facility, but Michael refused. He should be at home, Michael said. He should be at our home. I'm going to take him home and we'll take care of him. I didn't argue. It seems like the right thing. It seems like what a good son would do. And Michael seemed like a good son, finally stepping up, finally being present for his father. I thought maybe this would be good for us too. Maybe a crisis would pull us back together. I was so stupid. We set up the downstairs guest room as Robert's bedroom. I spent 3 days researching hospital beds and oxygen tanks and all the equipment we'd need. Michael's company gave him a leave of absence, unpaid, but they held his position. The nursing agency sent someone during the day, but Michael insisted I manage Robert's nighttime care. He said he needed to handle some business things, some financial stuff related to his father's estate. He'd be upstairs in the office. If Robert needed anything during the night, I should handle it. So that's what I did. For 3 weeks, I barely slept. I changed IVs, monitored his feeding tube, made sure he was positioned correctly to prevent bed sores, listened to the sound of his breathing, and waited for it to stop. During the day, I went back to work. My boss had been understanding about the situation, letting me work from home some days, leaving early on others. Michael would disappear most days. He said he was handling things, meetings, calls, paperwork, everything related to Robert's medical bills and insurance and his assets. He was upstairs a lot, though. I could hear him pacing in the office, talking on the phone. I'd bring him coffee and he'd barely look at me. Just take the cup and nod, like I was the home care aide, not his wife. 3 weeks of that. 3 weeks of sleeping in a chair beside my father-in-law's hospital bed, listening to the machine pump oxygen into his lungs, wondering if tonight was the night his heart would stop. 3 weeks of feeling like my husband was a ghost in his own house. And tonight, the night Robert actually woke up, the night we should have been celebrating, should have been calling our families with good news, should have been relieved that maybe this nightmare was ending. Michael wasn't there. I called his office. No answer. I called his best friend, Derek. Hey, is Michael with you? He's not answering his phone and... No, I haven't heard from him in like a week, Derek said. Is everything okay? Everything was not okay. I hung up and stood in the hallway outside Robert's room, watching through the glass as a nurse checked his vitals. He was awake. His eyes were open. He was looking at things. His lips were moving slightly, like he was trying to form words. After 3 weeks in the dark, he was coming back. And my husband had vanished. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Mitchell?
This is Jennifer Chen from Patterson and Associates. Your husband retained our firm yesterday to file for dissolution of marriage. We'll need you to contact us at your earliest convenience regarding service of documents. I read it 3 times. Dissolution of marriage. That's the legal term for divorce. Michael had hired a divorce attorney without telling me. He'd done it while his father was in a coma. He'd done it while I was downstairs wiping his father's face and changing his sheets and keeping him alive. And then he'd left. I stood in that ICU hallway with my phone in my hand, the text message glowing on the screen, and I realized I had absolutely no idea who my husband actually was. I stared at that text message for so long that my vision started to blur. The letters scrambled. Jennifer Chen, Patterson and Associates, dissolution of marriage. The words didn't make sense even though I knew exactly what they meant. I'd been a wife for 8 years,
and apparently, I was becoming an ex-wife without ever having a conversation about it. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. A nurse walked past me, and I must have looked like I was about to collapse because she stopped. "Ma'am, do you need to sit down?" "I'm fine," I whispered. I wasn't fine. I was the opposite of fine. I went back into Robert's room. He was sleeping now, his chest rising and falling with the mechanical rhythm of the ventilator. His face was thinner than I remembered, like the coma had stolen something from him. But he was alive. After 3 weeks of watching him hover at the edge of death, he'd come back. And the only person who should have been celebrating that moment with me had hired a lawyer and disappeared. I called Michael again, straight to voicemail. I called his office number and got the answering service. They were closed. Call back during business hours. I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside Robert's hospital bed and tried to think about what to do. The first thing I did was cry. Just sat there in the dark room with my father-in-law unconscious 10 feet away and let it happen. Silent crying, the kind where your shoulders shake and you can't breathe right. I cried for 3 minutes, maybe 5. Then I stopped, because crying wasn't going to help me. Michael's lawyer was. I typed the number into my phone with numb fingers and called. "Patterson and Associates, how can I direct your call?" "Jennifer Chen, tell her Ashley Mitchell is calling." I was put on hold. The wait felt eternal. Then a woman's voice, professional, cool, the kind that had probably delivered bad news 1,000 times before. "Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for calling. I understand this came as a surprise. My husband hired you yesterday to file for divorce without telling me, so yes, you could say it's a surprise. I can only speak to what your husband has instructed me to do. He's filed for dissolution with grounds of irreconcilable differences. He's requested— Wait, can he do that? Just file without talking to me first? He can file the paperwork. However, that doesn't mean the divorce is finalized. You'll be served with the documents, and then you have time to respond. But Mrs. Mitchell, I'd strongly recommend you contact your own attorney. Soon. Your husband has already begun the process, and he's requested an expedited timeline." Expedited. He wanted this to be over fast. "Where is he?" I asked. "I'm sorry?" "Michael, my husband. Do you know where he is?" There was a pause. "I can't disclose information about my client's location or personal circumstances." I hung up. I left the hospital at 1 a.m. I couldn't sit there anymore. I drove home through empty streets, my hands still shaking on the steering wheel. The house was exactly as we'd left it that morning. Michael's coffee cup was in the sink. His reading glasses were on the kitchen counter. Everything was normal, and everything was destroyed. I went upstairs to his office. The door was closed, like always. I opened it. The first thing I noticed was that his computer was gone. The desk was bare except for a desk lamp and a phone charger. All his files, his paperwork, everything, gone. I opened the drawers. Empty. He'd cleaned this room out. Systematically, deliberately, without me noticing. I went to our bedroom. His closet was half empty. Not obviously, he'd taken things strategically so it wouldn't be immediately apparent. But when I looked, I could see the gaps. His good suits, his winter coat, his gym bag. He'd packed. He'd packed and hidden it well enough that I hadn't noticed because I'd been too busy keeping his father alive. That's when I got angry. Not the hot, immediate kind of anger, the cold kind. The kind that makes you think clearly. I went downstairs and found the file box where we kept our important documents. Mortgage paperwork, insurance policies, bank statements. I pulled out the most recent statements from our joint account. The balance was half of what it should have been. I checked the savings account. Gone. $23,000, completely withdrawn. The withdrawals had been made over the past 2 weeks, small amounts that probably didn't trigger any fraud alerts. Careful. He'd been careful. I sat at the kitchen table with bank statements spread in front of me like evidence at a crime scene, and I realized my husband hadn't just left me. He'd been planning this. While I was changing his father's diapers, Michael was liquidating our assets. My phone rang at 2:47 a.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Officer Sarah Voss from the Oakmont Police Department. I'm calling about a vehicle registered to your address. A 2022 Tesla? Is that your vehicle? My stomach dropped. No, that's my husband's, Michael Mitchell. We've located the vehicle.
It's in the parking lot of the Riverside Motel on Route 9. It's been here since yesterday afternoon. We're conducting a welfare check because the room is registered to a Michael Mitchell and we're required to... The Riverside Motel. The place where college kids went to cheat on their partners. The place that rented rooms by the hour. I'm at the hospital, I heard myself say. St. Mary's. My father-in-law just woke up from a coma. Michael left me there without saying anything. I don't know where he's been or who he's been with. Do you want us to do a welfare check on the room? Yes, please. He might be hurt or... I stopped. He wasn't hurt. He was hiding. Just check. I waited while Officer Voss made the call. 3 minutes. 4. My coffee had gone cold on the counter. I stared at the bank statements and tried to breathe. Mrs. Mitchell? The room is unoccupied. The registered guest is not there. However, we did find some items in the room. Credit card receipts, clothing, personal effects. Do you know if your husband might be in crisis? Thinking about harming himself? No, I said. He's in crisis because he's a coward. But that wasn't entirely true, was it? This wasn't a crisis. This was a plan to leave, to take the money, to file for divorce while I was trapped at the hospital. A plan so carefully executed that I'd been too exhausted to see it happening. We can file a report, Officer Voss was saying. Missing person, possible financial fraud. But Mrs. Mitchell, given that he's apparently left voluntarily and taken his belongings, it's going to be difficult to... I don't care about finding him, I said. I care about protecting myself. After I hung up, I did something I should have done the moment I read Jennifer Chen's text. I called my mother. My mother, Linda, answered on the second ring even though it was 3 a.m., because she's the kind of person who answers the phone at 3 a.m., and she knew immediately that something was catastrophically wrong. Ashley? Sweetheart, what's happened? I told her everything. Not the edited version, the full, ugly version. Michael's distance, his coldness, the coma, the divorce papers, the missing money, the motel. I told her about waking up Robert and realizing my husband had vanished. I told her about the bank statements and the empty closet and the fact that I was apparently married to a man I'd never actually known. My mother was silent for a long moment. Then, pack a bag. Pack important documents. You're coming to my house. Mom, I can't just... Pack a bag. Now. I'm going to call my friend Patricia. She's a divorce attorney. She's good and she's mean, which is exactly what you need right now. You're going to stay with me, and we're going to make sure that bastard doesn't take another dime from you. Something shifted in me when my mother said that. Some tiny kernel of strength that I thought had died when Michael left started to reignite. I packed a bag. I packed documents. I packed my laptop and my phone chargers. I left a note for the nursing agency explaining that there had been a family emergency and asking them to increase Robert's daytime care. I locked the house and drove to my mother's place in Millbrook, the opposite direction from St. Mary's, the opposite direction from everything. It was 4:30 a.m. when I pulled into her driveway. She was standing on the porch in her bathrobe, waiting for me. I fell apart in her arms. "It's okay," she kept saying. "It's okay. We're going to fix this. We're going to fix this." But I wasn't sure anything could be fixed. What could be fixed about the fact that I'd been betrayed by the person I trusted most? What could be fixed about 8 years of my life turning out to be a lie? The next morning, my mother had 3 phone calls lined up. One with Patricia, the attorney, one with the bank to freeze accounts and report the fraudulent withdrawals, one with an accountant who could help untangle whatever financial mess Michael had created. Patricia arrived at my mother's house at 9 a.m. She was in her late 50s, with sharp eyes and the kind of energy that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I had a chance. "Tell me everything," she said, "and don't leave anything out." So I did. I told her about the coma, the care, the divorce papers, the money. I showed her the bank statements. I showed her the text from Jennifer Chen. Patricia's expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened. "He's made some significant mistakes," she said finally. "Filing for divorce without disclosing all assets, liquidating joint accounts without consent, abandoning marital responsibilities. These are not minor issues. More importantly, he's done it while you're the sole caregiver for his father. That's going to matter." "What do you mean?" "I mean that a judge is going to look very unfavorably on a man who left his wife caring for his comatose father while he drained their savings and filed for divorce in secret. We have leverage here, Ashley. We're going to use it." For the first time in 24 hours, I felt something other than despair. I felt like I might actually have a chance to fight back. But first, I had to figure out where Michael had gone. And more importantly, I had to figure out who he was with. Because there was no way he was alone at the Riverside Motel. There was no way this was just about leaving me. There was someone else involved. There had to be. Patricia leaned back in her chair and pulled out her legal pad. "Here's what we're going to do first," she said. "We're going to subpoena his phone records, his credit card statements, everything. And we're going to find out exactly what your husband has been doing for the past 3 months. Because I guarantee you, Ashley, this didn't start yesterday. This started a long time ago." She was right. I could feel it in my bones. Michael hadn't just decided to leave. He'd been planning it. And I was going to find out why. Patricia's prediction was right. The subpoenas came through within a week, and what they revealed made even her lean back in her chair with a low whistle. Michael had been planning this for 6 months. The withdrawals, the secret accounts, the motel room, it was all part of a carefully orchestrated exit strategy. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was who he'd been withdrawing the money for. Her name was Stephanie Chen, and she worked at Michael's real estate firm. "He's been seeing her since April," Patricia told me, spreading documents across her desk like a prosecutor preparing for trial. It was a Tuesday morning, 9 days after Michael disappeared. They've been meeting at the Riverside Motel twice a week. Credit card statements show dinner charges at restaurants across the state, places far enough from Oakmont that nobody would recognize him. And look at this. She slid a credit card statement across the desk. Highlighted in yellow were charges to a jewelry store in the city, $5,000. The date was October 16th, 2 days before Robert's stroke. "He bought her an engagement ring," I said quietly. "While you were preparing to be his father's caregiver, yes. He was buying another woman an engagement ring." I felt sick, but I wasn't surprised anymore. Betrayal stops surprising you after a certain point. It just becomes clearer, sharper, more detailed, more real. "There's more," Patricia said. She pulled out another document. "Stephanie Chen is Jennifer Chen's daughter." I stared at her. "The divorce lawyer's daughter?" "Exactly. Your husband didn't just hire a random attorney. He hired the mother of his girlfriend. This is coordinated, calculated. He wanted someone on the inside who would move fast and aggressive, who wouldn't have any sympathy for you. And Jennifer Chen was incentivized. Her daughter was getting married to your husband. Except he's not getting married to her. He's married to me." That's the legal problem he was trying to solve. Patricia leaned back in her chair. She was wearing her reading glasses on a chain, and she pulled them off to look at me directly. "Ashley, I'm going to tell you something that's going to make you angry.
but you need to hear it. Your husband made a critical mistake. He filed for divorce before fully disclosing his assets and before legally separating his finances from yours. He used joint accounts to fund an affair. He attempted to hide assets. And then he disappeared. In the eyes of the court, this is not a man trying to end a marriage. This is a man trying to commit fraud. What does that mean for me? It means we have leverage, significant leverage. When we go to court, we're not just asking for your fair share of the marital assets. We're asking for punitive damages. We're asking for attorney's fees to be paid by him. And we're asking for spousal support, potentially substantial spousal support, because he abandoned you while you were the sole caregiver for his elderly father. For the first time since Michael left, I felt something shift in my chest. It wasn't quite hope, but it was the possibility of hope. When do we go to court? I asked. Not yet. First, we need to find him. You can't serve divorce papers to someone who's disappeared. And more importantly, we need to build our case. I want to interview Stephanie Chen. I want to talk to people who worked with Michael. I want to establish a timeline that shows premeditation. And I want to find out exactly where he is and what he's doing. Finding Michael turned out to be easier than I expected. It was my mother who found him, actually. She was scrolling through Facebook at 2 a.m. She'd been doing that a lot since my marriage imploded, as if she could somehow find answers in social media, when she saw a post from Derek, Michael's best friend. It was a photo from a golf outing tagged at Pinewood Country Club, about 45 minutes from Oakmont. In the background, barely visible, was Michael. He was smiling. He looked tanned and relaxed, like a man without a care in the world. He looked happy. I showed the photo to Patricia at our next meeting. She barely glanced at it before picking up the phone. I need you to have Michael Mitchell served with divorce papers, she told Jennifer Chen's associate. He's been located, and I'm filing a motion for emergency financial disclosure and asset freeze. Your client has 48 hours to provide a complete accounting of all assets, income, and accounts, or I'm going to the judge with a motion for contempt of court. 2 days later, Michael's lawyer called. Not Jennifer Chen, she'd wisely recused herself from the case, but a new attorney, someone from a different firm. His name was Richard Holbrook, and he sounded deeply unhappy. My client is prepared to negotiate, he said. Your client tried to defraud his wife, Patricia replied. There's nothing to negotiate. He's going to provide full financial disclosure, or he's going to explain to a judge why he shouldn't go to jail. The financial disclosure came through that afternoon. It was even worse than we thought. Michael had transferred money to an account in Stephanie's name, set up a line of credit in her father's business, and taken out a loan against the equity in our house, the house that I'd helped pay for, the house where I'd spent the last 3 weeks keeping his father alive. This is beautiful, Patricia said, reading through the documents. This is a gift. He's documented his own fraud. He's shown intent, premeditation, and conspiracy with Jennifer Chen. This case is over, Ashley. We've already won. The hearing was scheduled for December 15th, 3 weeks away. Patricia spent those 3 weeks preparing like she was going to war, because in some ways, she was. She deposed Stephanie Chen, who broke down crying and admitted the entire affair. She interviewed the nursing agency about how much time I'd spent caring for Robert. She gathered bank records, credit card statements, phone records. She built a case that was airtight. Michael showed up to the hearing in a suit that looked new. He sat next to Richard Holbrook and didn't look at me once. The judge, a woman named Harriet Morrison, who had the kind of face that suggested she'd seen every variation of human betrayal, listened to Patricia's opening statement with an expression of barely concealed contempt. Your Honor, Patricia said, we're here not just to dissolve a marriage, but to hold a man accountable for attempting to defraud his wife while she was caring for his incapacitated father. We're going to show you a pattern of deliberate deception, financial manipulation, and abandonment that demonstrates not just infidelity, but criminal intent. Richard Holbrook objected, but the judge overruled him. And then the evidence came out. Every text message, every credit card charge, every withdrawal. The timeline was devastating. Michael had started the affair in April, started planning the exit in August, and filed for divorce while I was literally keeping his father alive. I testified for 2 hours. I talked about the 3 weeks in the ICU, about the hospital bed and the feeding tube and the nights I barely slept, about finding the text from Jennifer Chen at 11:47 p.m., about the empty closet, about the drained accounts, about realizing that my husband had been planning to leave me while I was saving his father's life. Michael's lawyer tried to argue that I was exaggerating, that marriages sometimes end, that infidelity didn't necessarily indicate criminal intent. But the judge wasn't buying it. "Mr. Mitchell," Judge Morrison said, looking directly at Michael, "you attempted to liquidate marital assets, establish secret accounts, and file for divorce through an attorney who had a personal and financial interest in the outcome. You did this while your wife was providing unpaid medical care to your father. You then disappeared. This is not a simple dissolution. This is fraud." She awarded me the house, free and clear. She awarded me spousal support, $2,000 a month for 5 years. She awarded me attorney's fees. And she made Michael responsible for all of Robert's ongoing medical care, since his actions had directly contributed to my being unable to maintain my own employment. Furthermore, Judge Morrison said, "I'm recommending that the State Bar Association review Ms. Chen's conduct in this matter. An attorney has a duty not to participate in fraud, regardless of family connections." Michael's face went white. He stood up to say something, and his lawyer grabbed his arm, pulling him back down. As we left the courtroom, Patricia put her hand on my shoulder. "You did good," she said. "You did really, really good." Outside, my mother was waiting with coffee. She hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. I should have felt triumphant, and part of me did, but mostly I felt exhausted. I'd won, technically. I had the house. I had financial security for the next 5 years. I had the knowledge that Michael would face consequences for what he'd done. But I'd also lost 8 years of my life to someone who didn't exist. 3 months later, I got a call from the nursing home where Robert had been transferred after his recovery. He'd regained most of his motor function. He was in physical therapy. He was asking about me. I hadn't seen him since that night in the hospital when he woke up. I'd been too angry, too hurt, too ashamed that the man I'd married was his son. But I went. I drove to Millbrook Care Center on a Tuesday afternoon and found Robert in the physical therapy room, working with a therapist on his gait. He was thinner than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp. They got sharper when he saw me. "Ashley," he said. His speech was slightly slurred, but understandable. "You came." "I came," I said. "Michael," he said. It wasn't a question. His face tightened. "Yeah, Michael did some things, bad things, but it's okay. It's being handled." Robert nodded slowly. He understood more than I'd expected. Maybe stroke survivors understand betrayal differently. Maybe they've already stared into the abyss of loss. "You took care of me," he said, "when you didn't have to, when your husband—" He stopped, frustrated with his own speech. "You stayed." I pulled up a chair. I stayed. Why? I thought about that question for a long time. Why had I stayed? Why had I spent 3 weeks in an ICU changing the sheets of a man who'd never been particularly kind to me, keeping him alive while my husband was planning to leave me? I could have walked away. I could have said it wasn't my responsibility. But I hadn't. Because that wasn't who I am. "Because it was the right thing," I said finally. "And because you're a person. Even when everything else was falling apart, that was still true." Robert looked at me with something that might have been respect, or gratitude, or both. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I sold the house. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Every corner of it held memories of Michael, and I was tired of living inside those memories. I bought a smaller place, a townhouse near my mother's, with the proceeds. It was mine, completely, entirely mine. No joint ownership, no complications. Just me and the space I'd chosen. Stephanie, Chen, and Michael left the state. They got married in Vegas, which made me laugh when I heard about it. Not a happy laugh, but a laugh nonetheless.
They moved to Arizona, where Michael took a job at a smaller real estate firm for a fraction of what he'd been making. His punishment was partly mine to exact, but mostly his own making. I ran into Jennifer Chen once, about a year after the divorce. It was at a coffee shop in downtown Oakmont. She was alone, looking older than she had before, like the case had aged her. She saw me and froze. I could have walked past her. I could have ignored her. But instead, I stopped. "Your daughter made a choice," I said quietly, "and you helped her make it. I hope whatever you got out of this was worth it." She didn't say anything. She just looked away. I left her standing in the coffee shop and didn't look back. The thing about betrayal is that it changes you. It doesn't destroy you if you don't let it, but it definitely changes you. You become more careful, more skeptical. You learn to read between the lines of what people say. You understand that people are capable of extraordinary cruelty, and that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who will hurt you most. But you also learn something else. You learn that you're stronger than you thought. That you can survive things you never imagined surviving. That you can stand in an ICU with a stranger's life in your hands and do the right thing, even when everything is falling apart. That you can face a man who betrayed you in a courtroom and tell the truth without flinching. I went back to work. I got promoted. I started dating again, slowly, carefully, with people who earned my trust rather than assumed it. And I started to feel like myself again. Not the version of myself who existed before Michael left, but something new, something harder, something better. Robert died 2 years after his stroke, peacefully in his sleep at the care facility. I went to the funeral. Michael was there, and he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. I looked away. We had nothing left to say to each other. After the service, one of Robert's friends approached me. She was a woman named Martha who'd known Robert for years. "He talked about you," she said, "before he died. He said you were the only person who'd ever really shown him kindness without expecting anything in return. He said it was the most important thing that happened to him in those last years, that it changed how he thought about people." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd taken care of Robert because it was the right thing to do, not because I expected gratitude or recognition. But hearing that my actions had meant something to him, that they'd somehow mattered in a way I hadn't anticipated, it healed something I didn't know was broken. I never saw Michael again after that funeral. I heard through the grapevine that his marriage to Stephanie ended 5 years in, that he'd struggled professionally, that he'd moved back east and was starting over again, for what probably felt like the 100th time in his mind, though it was really just the first time he'd had to face actual consequences. I didn't feel vindicated by any of that. I felt something quieter. I felt like I'd learned the lesson I needed to learn, and now I could let it go. The last thing I want to say about this whole thing is this. People will tell you that healing means forgiveness, that you have to forgive the person who hurt you in order to move on. I don't think that's true. I don't forgive Michael. I don't forgive Jennifer Chen. I don't forgive Stephanie for knowing exactly what she was doing and doing it anyway. But I've let go of my anger about it. I've taken what happened and I've used it to make myself stronger, smarter, more careful about who I let into my life. I've used it to understand that loyalty isn't something you can assume. It's something you have to build, day by day, with people who prove they deserve it. And the irony, the beautiful irony, is that in the end, the person who taught me that was Robert, not Michael, not anyone who loved me or was supposed to love me, the man in the coma. Life is strange that way. It teaches you the most important lessons through the people you least expected to learn from.